Welcome back, baseball fans, to the 1971-74 Carryover League Draft, and we're just going to look at a composite look at rounds 5 through 8, and I'm just going to go through each team and pick the best choice that they made in rounds 5 through 8. It doesn't mean the most talented player. It means the player at the right time in the draft was opportunistic, fits the need, and kind of focus on that versus just the obvious, the regular players that they might take. And it might just be all the 5th round picks, since that's the most highly touted player. Now we're going to look at Philadelphia. And for Philadelphia, here we go with, now these are the first 4 rounds of the draft are players from the years of 71, 72, 73, 74. In the 5th round, it's from the year of 74. 6th round from 73, 7th round from 72, 8th round from 71. So with this, the best pick here I like is getting Bob Boone in the 6th round. Bob Boone, he is their catcher, and they have McCarver, and this is his 575 plate appearances. So he got into it right away when he got into the bigs at age 25. I think that's the best, most impactful player. When you combine it with Mike Schmidt and Gary Maddox, this is starting to look like the Phillies team that starts winning the divisions in the 70s. They're still a little bit too green, though. Next team on the clock would be Kansas City. Let's see what we like at their best 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th round pick. This one is a little all over the place. They didn't really have a great pick in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. It's really hard to... Well, I'm just going to give it, on the clever scale, I'm going to say Larry Gura. His stats aren't very good on his card, but the point is they got him. And so for one painful year, you'll have a bad Larry Gura, and then, you can get him into the league with a 75 card maybe next year, or 76 card year after that. So getting him from the Cubs was the best move here for Kansas City in the later rounds. Next team on the clock was the Padres. Rounds 5 through 8. Best player here, I'm going to give it to sticking with Ollie Brown. That's a nice card in 72, even though he didn't play as frequently. But he fills a need in corner outfield, and he keeps Dave Winfield in the minors until his defense improves. Because Winfield to be a Gold Glover, but right now he's a 4, so no sense bringing him up until he gets better, in my opinion. And so I think Ollie Brown pretty much does the Dave Winfield job in this case. So a good use of hanging on to a guy. By the way, Ollie Brown's got a -4 arm, right up there with Dave Winfield. All right, next up, the New York Yankees. In rounds 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, I'm gonna call this one Gene Michael, because it's funny. 2 teams who had veteran shortstops that didn't protect them were the Yankees with Gene Michael and the Pirates with Gene Alley. And the Yankees took both. One's right-handed, one's a switch hitter. Michael, by the way, this is his best batting average in 6 years. He hits .260 in 1974. Oh, by the way, he can play 3rd base and 2nd base. That's because he didn't play. He only had 193 plate appearances. So because he didn't play every day, he was more of a utility player, and he does the job. He backs up all 3 infield positions. He can back up Nettles at 3rd, and can back up the 2nd baseman Horace Clarke. Next up, the Expos. Here, I'm just going to give it to Dale Murray, just for sheer talent. He didn't really fit, because they don't have enough lefties, and this team's basically saying, we don't care. We're only going to go with 2 left-handed pitchers on this team, because Dale Murray is ridiculous. He's got an ERA of 1.03 in 69 2/3 innings. That's got to be the most impactful player in rounds 5 through 8. And the reason you're wondering, how do you get a guy with an ERA of 103 in the 5th round? And the answer is, he's the 2nd player chosen in the year of 1974, and BPA was Mike Jorgensen, who was the 1st round pick. Mike Jorgensen hit .310 with a .931 OPS. He was the 1st round pick, and so Rounds 5, 6, 7, 8 does not apply to BPA. The BPA is just for the rounds 1, 2, 3, 4 to generate an order. 5, 6, 7, 8 is just availability. All right, the Cubs, mostly bringing the old guard back. And of all these guys, I'm going to give this one to Jim Hickman, because he had a monster 1970. Then I saw the 71 card was okay. But then in 72, the numbers get a little bit better. He's got a 826 OPS in 72. And they went out and got Johnny Briggs to play right field. But basically, Hickman will play some DH, and I'll play a little bit of first base and some right field. So I like Jim Hickman of all these guys in the rounds 5 through 8. Seattle. Next up here, we got 3 pitchers and a hitter. I'm going to go with Diego Segui because he's going to be the closer, and he's very good. Got a 2.78 ERA in 100 innings, and very good card. I'm going to go with Diego Segui versus, well, the other guys just really aren't as good. All right, Portland. All right, 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, I'm going to go, I got to go with this one. I'm going to go with Ray Bear. 1972 Ray Bear. Ladies and gentlemen, he's got an ERA of 0.54. And Dale Murray fans out there are furious. Furious, I said, because Dale Murray's ERA is 1.03, and they thought he had the lowest ERA in the league. No siree. In the 7th round of the draft, Ray Bear pitched 16 and 2/3 innings for the Cardinals. But he did give up 18 hits and 6 walks, and the whip is 1.44. So probably one of the weaker 0.54 ERAs you're going to see, but it's only singles. So, we like Ray Bear going to an expansion team. You always see these kooky extra player cards, of course, going to the expansion teams. Next up, Baltimore. This one is, I'm just going to go conventionally here with these and just say Paul Blair. Just because he's, could have been a top 4 pick. And he's 30, but he's still the great glove. He had 17 home runs and stole 27 bases, 730 OPS. So he's may as well be 69 or 70. He does not age poorly. So I'm going to go Paul Blair for Baltimore there. All right, Florida, picks 5 through 8. On this one is kind of close, but I'm going to go with Felix Millan. I'm going to go with Felix Millan here as a 6th round pick because he was a second player after Orlando Pena from 73. What I like about Millan is that he has 699 plate appearances. My goodness. So he is the Iron Man second baseman, and this team had terrible defense a year ago. They have good defense now. They have Millan as a 2E10 second baseman for an entire season. That should really help keep this team together defensively. I like Felix Millan on Florida. California Angels. Best pick here. And it's still got to be Andy Hassler. Andy Hassler, when you double up with left-handed starting pitchers in the same moment in the 4th and 5th rounds, you have, Frank Tanana and Andy Hassler, back-to-back players from 1974 emerging, because I think that's Tanana's first year and Hassler's first year. Look at their ages. Tanana's 20, Hassler's 22. Tanana will have a fine career. Hassler, he's got this good year. I think he's good in 1980 and one other year. He really is up and down all over the place. But this is a great start for Hassler, and you have him for 4 years. 71, 2, 3, 4. Once 74 is over, you probably let him go. Okay. The Ohio Players team. Best pick in this one that I liked. I'm going to go George Hendrick. George Hendrick here because he's a 2 in center field, and he hits for power and average. And moreover, he's the perfect expansion team player because Hendrick traveled a lot in his career. He played for, Oakland and Cleveland and San Diego and St. Louis, I think California at the end, maybe another team. So that's a perfect candidate for an expansion team like Ohio. He's 24 years old, and he's going to play here for a long time. They're going to run him all the way through the early 80s. George Hendrick in Ohio. Great pick. Okay, the Giants. Best pick here. I'm going to call it Ed Goodson. I'm going to call it, because this was a little controversial because it meant that they lost Gary Maddox, but they didn't have room for Gary Maddox. So why have, this team once had Willie Mays, Ken Henderson. They still have Bob Bonds, Gary Matthews. They have Gary Thompson in the minors. They have so many center fielders in this organization. But you get Ed Goodson as a third baseman who hits .302 and can hit left-handed pitching. He's an everyday third baseman. I think that's a good stick at third base for the Giants. And you have him for 3 years. So he and Jesus Alou are the only 300 hitters they drafted. They got Alou with their 72 season. So next up, the Tigers. Oh, I got to talk about this pick. So this pick is incomplete, but it's my favorite pick here. So the Tigers want to get Billy Grabarkowitz's 1971 card. So because he's a 2 third baseman with a 400 on base, so what they did was, instead of letting another team scoop him up in a different season, they drafted Billy Grabarkowitz with his 72 card. And in the token round of the draft, where teams can swap players out, it's at that point, since they have him under control now, that they're going to replace the 72 Grabarkowitz card with the 71 card and get the on base. Because right now, he's got a 265 on base with the 72 card. So that was just to make sure nobody would steal him from him. Because at third base, he will play third along with Jerry Terrell, and Tom Verizon will play short. That's what's on the left side of the Tiger infield. Because they didn't hold on to Aurelio Rodriguez and Ed Brinkman. Interesting crew there. All right, Colorado. Best pick here, I got to go Don Money because he's a 1E8 third baseman. He's 27 years old. He had 709 plate appearances. So that story of the expansion teams getting small sample players, you can stick a fork in that, because Rick Monday had 651 plate appearances and Don Money 709 plate appearances. Monday and Money will play for the Colorado Rocky team all the way through the early 80s. Don Money's a great pick there. Can play a little bit of second base if you need him to. Arizona. Picks 5, 6, 7, and 8. Oh, I like this guy. So, yeah, this team did not have a first baseman. Wow. Didn't have a first baseman in the draft and just assumed there'd be one out there. And lo and behold, they found Hal Breeden, who the Expos could not hold on to as a first baseman because they had Ron Fairley and they had Mike Jorgensen. So Hal Breeden became available at age 29. 275, 888 OPS. Great year, his only really good year, I believe. In 73. Nice pick there for Arizona. Texas Rangers. I'm going to go Lenny Randle here because they doubled up with rookies in 74. And Hargrove made a lot of sense. Lenny Randle, 300 hitting switch hitter with a little bit of speed. He can play second, third, short in the outfield if you need him to. So the full versatility that a young Texas team needs. The other picks are all veteran players, older players like 34-year-old Gonzalez and 33-year-old Bernie Allen. So the Pirates. Picks 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Of all these, there's some good players here, of course. Bob Robertson. Funny, Robertson, Sanguillen, and getting Dave Parker's rookie card. But I'm going to say Larry Milbourne. And the reason I'm going to say this is my favorite pick here is because he fits a need. The problem is Dave Parker, you can't really have him and Roberto Clemente on the same team, which is it didn't happen, of course. But it can now because you can extend Clemente all the way through to 75, even after his tragedy, because it's a 4-year carryover league. So Parker is a nice pick, but he really is going to be platooning with Richie Zisko at 320. It's kind of a good player will be on the bench for the Pirates. Seguin and Robertson are obvious, but Milbourne, they needed to get another left-handed bat in the middle of the infield, and Larry Milbourne's a switch hitter. So they have him, Frank Tavares at short, and they have Mazeroski and Stennett at second. So you got some defense, you got a high batting average, you got a switch hitter, and you got some speed. The 4 middle infielders for the Pirates. One of the only teams to have 4 guys in the middle infield, because they don't have to double up on other positions. St. Louis. This is great. My favorite pick here is, I don't know if it's pronounced Scipio or Scipio Spinks. 1972 St. Louis Cardinal pitcher, 16 starts in 118 innings with a 2.67 ERA. And in this part of the draft, the Cardinals needed a right-handed starter and a right-handed reliever, and they found both these guys are in their own organization. Al Santorini, 71 Cardinals, and Scipio Spinks, 72 Cardinals. Spinks is better than Santorini, and I like that pick. He's a starter 7, joining Bob Gibson, Sonny Siebert, and Chris Short. Next up, the Toronto Blue Jays. Of all these guys, I'm going to say, of all these guys, I'm going to say I like, as the best pick, I'm going to say Bobby Canoop. And the reason is, they already had the rights to Clendenon and Cheney. Sosa was just another righty reliever. But Canoop, they were looking for a guy who could be a 2 at second and maybe a 3 at third, so that Darryl Cheney and Tim Foley can all be late inning defense. And Bobby Canoop is exactly a 2 at second and a 3 at third, and he actually hits okay. And it's funny, the White Sox cut Bobby Canoop and Jim LaFay. Seattle ends up with LaFay, Toronto ends up with Canoop, and the White Sox end up with George Orta. So I like getting Canoop because this is a team that's got pitching and defense. And Toronto got a 2 at second base, a 2 at shortstop, and a 3 at third. So I like that pick the best. Las Vegas. Okay. From these guys, again, based on, I'm going to go Juan Benitez here as a 5th round pick. He was like the last piece they needed. They needed a corner outfielder who could hit lefties better than righties. And Benitez crushes lefties on cue. He's a center fielder, but they can put him in left field, which is where they need him to play. He platoons with Jim Nettles because they have Ken Berry in center and Mike Anderson in right. And he actually has the highest batting average over A-Rod and Brinkman. So I like Juan Benitez to them. Milwaukee Brewers. There's really a couple neat guys here. I'm just going to mention that they did get Ben Oglivie off of Boston and then Detroit. So theoretically, they could have Oglivie the entire time in the 1970s and hold on to him all the way to 1980 when he hits 40 home runs. So they got him now. So we won't have Oglivie going to Boston or Detroit. But the pick I like the best here is Don McMahon, who they got in a trade with the Giants. And McMahon had a really dismal year a year ago with the Giants. And then, believe it or not, as a 40-year-old, he was a keeper. But now he's 43 years old, 3 years later, 1973, and he has a 1.48 ERA. 1.48 ERA in 30 innings. So I'm going to put Don McMahon as my favorite pick of the Brewers through a trade with the Giants. All right, Atlanta Braves. Oh, wow. My goodness here. Well, I got to talk about, I guess the pick I'm going to mention is Buzz Capra again, because he can pitch on 3 days rest. He just pummels right-handed hitters. Lefties can get hits off of him, but he's just, for a guy who could pitch on 3 days rest, he has no hits on his card as a starting pitcher, which is incredibly unique. You almost never see that. A relief pitcher, sure, but a starting pitcher who pitches on 3 days rest and not have any hits on his card, right-handed hitters, I can't make that claim for like Tom Seaver or Jim Palmer or Don Sutton or anybody. No hits, and that's what Capra does. They have to load up against lefties against them. And the other interesting tidbit here is that Capra will eventually play for the Mets, or did play for the Mets, but prior to this. So he was a Met, or isn't, and then he's also a Brave in '74. All right, the Twins. Best pick here for the Twins. I'm going to go with Bill Campbell. Bill Campbell in the 5th round. They get a nice closer. The Twins always had a great bullpen. Last year they had Ron Peranowski, Pete Reichert, and a great Stan Williams. Peranowski got old and has not been drafted yet. Stan Williams was a reacquired, but his ERAs are over 4. So they just plugged Bill Campbell into that closer role. Twins will always have good closers. Even later in the decade, they'll have Doug Corbett closing games. So the Twins have always going to have a good Strat-O-Matic bullpen for me, and they'll have another good one, thanks to Bill Campbell. Next up, Cleveland. Their picks here, nothing really jumps off the page as being a perfect move here. I'm just going to say Oscar Gamble because they needed they probably could have held on to Frank Robinson, but they knew they had guys like Charlie Spikes and Oscar Gamble in the farm system, so they let Frank Robinson go. And Oscar Gamble's 24 years old in '74, and he finally lets it go. 291, 833 OPS, does it 19 home runs, and he's just getting started. So he gets ignited. I mean, a Gamble is rushed to the big leagues at like age 20 and doesn't do a whole lot, but by '74 he finally puts it all together. So the Indians are not going to regret letting Frank Robinson go. Houston's on the clock. And Houston, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Oh boy. Not the greatest cast, but I'm going to give it to a player I particularly like. Dennis Menke, 32 years old. Actually, would be on the Reds here as part of the Joe Morgan trade, but he's still with Houston. So he can still be part of the Joe Morgan trade. The Astros still have Jack Billingham, Joe Morgan, and Dennis Menke on their roster. Why I like Menke defensively, a 2 at first, third, a 3 at second, a 4 at short, a 191 batting average, but a 368 on base percentage with a ton of walks on his card. So it's a fun card to use because of all those walks and the great defense and the versatility. So I like Dennis Menke as an Astro. Next up, Boston. Picks 5, 6, 7, and 8. I'm going to call out Tommy Harper here because he had a great 1970 for the Milwaukee Brewers, his first year after the Seattle Pilots. Gets traded to the Red Sox. Is okay in 71 and 72, but in 73, he really blooms with 54 stolen bases and a 281 batting average, 774 OPS, 17 home runs. So he is going to be the leadoff. He's 32 years old, but in the short term, for the next 3 years, he's going to be the leadoff guy to ignite the Red Sox lineup. And the Red Sox have not had any speed like that in this timeline till now. So Tommy Harper, I like that pick for the Red Sox. All right, next up, the Dodgers. This is kind of tough to decide on which guy here. Let's see. I'm gonna call Davey Lopes, and the reason is that the Dodgers needed to add a second baseman and a third baseman. But when you do the draft, you have the 5th round, then the 6th round. Now Lopes is available and is better in 74, but they decided, you know what? Say is better in 74, so we'll go with Lopes in 73. So being able to choose which year to use for Davey Lopes made it smooth for the Dodgers. Now you got Lopes, Say, and Garvey, and Russell. They're all there. Davey Lopes, 28 years old in 73. I didn't realize he started so late. Or he was a late bloomer. Still played a long career. So Davey Lopes, I like that pick for the Dodgers in the 6th round. The White Sox, team that is trying to get back to. All right, I'm going to call out the oddball here. So they had the rights to Henderson, Aparicio, and Egan, but I like this pick of Bob Stinson as a switch-hitting catcher, 27 years old. He was an Expo catcher, which is a real shame for the Expos because they kept the wrong pair. They kept Bateman and Bacabella and let Stinson go. And in 136 plate appearances, Stinson's got a 374 on base, 414 slugging, 788 OPS. And he's a switch hitter with plenty of power. And they have Tom Egan, a right-handed hitting catcher. Stinson and Egan combined will be a very fun tandem. They don't throw for anything, but they should be a very impactful catching duo for the White Sox. I like that pick of Stinson there. I mean, Ken Henderson's a better player, I get it, but Stinson became available late in this draft as a free agent, and so the White Sox took him away from the Expos. So that made that a particularly juicy choice. All right, the Mets. You know, the Mets have some nice picks here in the in this part of the draft here. I'm going to go with Gil Garrido as the 7th round pick. They were looking for, they wanted a 2 at 2nd or 3rd. There wasn't any. None. So they had to settle for a 3. But Garrido is a 3E8 at 2nd and a 3E12 at 3rd. That's interesting. So he's the part of Goldilocks 8 defensively for this team, and this guy has a 368 on-base percentage. So on-base percentage is something big on the Mets. It's how they do well, that in defense and the fantastic pitching. And Gil Garrido was with the Florida team last year, and that's a nice little player. Even though he only had 87 plate appearances, he does a lot with them getting on base. They also held on to Ted Martinez and, of course, Bud Harrelson, too. They don't have to worry about Wayne Garrett's terrible defense, a 40-31. They can bring Garrido in at the end of games. Probably will end up playing every day, though not starting. Oakland. Oh, boy. Yeah, that's a player here I like a lot. And Oakland A's, yeah, they finally got up on somebody. We have been talking about Oakland stealing their players a lot. If you've been following me along, it's like, try and steal Bill North, somebody did. Try and steal Mike Epstein, somebody did. Try and steal Paul Lindblad, somebody did. Try and keep all the Oakland guys away from Oakland. So what happens? Oakland ends up stealing Lynn McLaughlin away from the Red Sox before the Red Sox let him go to the Cardinals. He's 22 years old. He's got 22 starts in 72, 8-7 with a 3.41 ERA, and Oakland ends up with him. So Lynn McLaughlin might be a big story for Oakland as the number 4 starter behind Blue, Hunter, Kenny Holtzman. Last year, who was the number 4 starter? Cal Kuntz was the number 4 starter in the World Series. Lynn McLaughlin might be starting in the World Series. Nice pick, 22 years old. Wow, kind of takes the spot vacated by Blue Moon Odom in the rotation. And last, the Cincinnati Reds. Which is their best pick here? First of all, I got to say it's a questionable pick that they took Steve Busby away from Kansas City. It traded for him. Had to give up a token to get him. But I just think he's too young and he walks too many batters. But he pitches on 3 days rest. But the pick I like, of course, is Bobby Tolan. The reason this is such a great pick is they can keep Geronimo and Tolan. So they drafted Geronimo to play center field, and Bobby Tolan just moves over into right field. See, Tolan's a 2 in center, but he's a 2 in right. Geronimo will play center. Tolan moves over to right. And Pete Rose was in right field. Now he's in left field. Bernie Carbo's gone. So that's what happened to their outfield. Bernie Carbo left, Cesar Geronimo arrived, and here we go, Reds. So that's a 2-year deal for Tolan. So it means that they don't have to add George Foster and Ken Griffey just yet. They can wait till like 1975, 1976 before you add those guys. Tolan will stick around, try and get another World Series ring. All right, that's it tonight for the best picks in the 5th through 8th rounds. Next up, we'll do a video of the token round of the draft. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.